Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to this author spotlight video. I'm here with author Tim Pankhurst, the author of this hefty book here, Every Effing Inch. It's a tale of the trail of the Te Araroa track in New Zealand, and it's one of the most notoriously long and arduous tracks in New Zealand. So thank you so much for joining me today, Tim. Welcome. How are you feeling today?
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you for that nice intro. I'm feeling never better.
That's fantastic. I have so many questions about this book and about this trail. So I would like to know, when did you decide to hike this trail and why?
Yeah, we asked ourselves that question sometimes. So it was formed over a few years, I think. For a long time, I worked at Wellington newspapers and then Fairfax. And so I'd often walk down Willis Street, and in the junction of Willis Street and Lambton Quay, there's a plaque set in the concrete that's part of the Te Araroa Trail. Because the trail, when it reaches Wellington and it comes down through the botanical gardens, down the Wadestown Hill, and then through the central city, and then through the southern walkway to Island Bay. And every time I walk past that plaque, I'd pause and look at it and think, wouldn't it be cool to walk the length of our country one day? So that sort of formed over, a few years. I was really, really intrigued when the trail was formally opened. So I resolved that once I retired full-time, then I'd tackle the Te Araroa.
Wow, okay. Yeah, so a bit of a journey in the making, almost as if the sign is taunting you. Did you know that going into this that you wanted to write about it, or did that kind of come a little bit later on?
Not initially, but I was joined by very good friend Kerry Prendergast. As soon as I mentioned I was going to do this walk, she said, "I'll do it too." She's a woman of great resolve, and my wife Sue said, "Well, yeah, okay, I'll come along on the first bit, but I'm not committing to all of it." So we set off, as a trio, and the so that was a sort of genesis of getting underway. And then as we went along, the people you meet on the trail and in backcountry huts are invariably interesting. Somebody who takes the trouble to get into the backcountry like that usually has a story to tell. So what we would do is we'd come into a hut, or when we're talking to people along the trail, and I wouldn't take out my notepad. I just sort of gently interview them, test out their background and so on, and then declare that, look, I'm looking at writing a book on this trail. Would you mind if I included you? And invariably they said yes, even with some pretty personal details. And I'd always follow up afterwards and say, this is what I'm going to write. Are you happy with this? And nobody knocked me back. So it became clear, fairly early on, that there was some really rich material here. So what I would do is I'd take, at the end of the day, normally when we would tuck it out, and of course there's no light in the huts except for candle. I'd do brief notes of the day, and then when I got back home, write them up. And also I did a lot of historical research, because I thought for this book to be of interest, it needed to be much more than just a plod from day to day. Day 17, we walked 23 kilometres from here to there, which a number of books over the years on the trail have been exactly that. And even for somebody doing it, they're quite tedious. So I took the risk of going down a lot of byways. I talk about predator control. I talk about the musket wars, the land wars, the things that have shaped our country, the way our forests and cities have been shaped and so on, and some of the interesting people who've been involved in that. So it's much more than just a story of three people plodding their way down to Bluff.
Yeah, it sounds like a really unique take on it for sure. I love that you've included these other people in your journey as well. You're right, they must have some amazing stories to be on this journey too. So that's fantastic. Um, were there any moments along the trail that you thought, oh, this is a little bit too much for me, it's too long? Maybe you thought of quitting, or is it just, nah, we have to get this done?
Uh, Look, they were pretty testing days at times. It's 141 days. We weren't capable of doing it in one hit, and I really admire people who just do it from go to woe, and that takes about 5 months.
Mm.
We did it over 2 summers, 141 days, and our longest stint was 19 days from the Cape to Auckland. So we'd do a stint, and then we'd go back and recuperate and go and see physios
Yeah.
and doctors and all that, and get repaired for the next bit. But we were going over the Travers Saddle in Nelson Lakes. There was snow on the saddle. It's made it quite difficult getting up there, and it's a long, long day. And Kerry said to us, "Remind me while we're doing this again." And we did have a few moments like that. But there was only I think, one fearful night where I really questioned what we were doing, and that was in the Richmond Range. It's really testing. It's a really hard 6-7 day tramp. It was really, at the edge of our capabilities, and we were in a hut with the Wairoa River, sort of in this very gloomy hut down in between a cleft in the hills that's cut by the Wairoa River. And the river was thundering away all night, and we knew we had to cross it 8 times the next day. And we also had to sidle along very steep sides to the gorge. And I don't think any of us slept that night. We just lay there thinking, "Ooh, how are we going to get through tomorrow?"
Yeah.
And sure enough, when we got to the first crossing, Kerry got swept away, and we had to pull her out. So it was a really testing day. But once we cracked that, we thought, well, this is going to be as hard as it gets. We were almost right.
Oh, almost. Okay. I guess read more until we find out about that. Okay. Well, that sounds really trying, but there must have been, in and amongst all of those days, something that just really captured you. What was the highlight of this trek for you?
There were some sublime moments, and we were doing quite a lot of this during when New Zealand was locked down.
Mm.
So, and some days we go a whole day and not see another person. And while the rest of New Zealand was, having to keep their distance and wear masks, we were up in magnificent high country, and some of that tussock country, in Otago and Canterbury, is just amazing. And 99% of New Zealanders are never going to experience it firsthand. And being there with this, there's no ambient light, so this magnificent blanket of stars that you could almost feel you could reach up and touch. And the only sound, would be a stream bubbling by the hut, and perhaps the wind, and almost spiritual.
Mm.
To be in those surroundings was really quite something.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. It sounds magical. It's almost making me want to do the same thing.
You can
Um,
always do parts of it. You don't have to tackle the whole lot.
Yeah, this is true, I suppose. Oh, okay, I'll think about it. In a few words, like, how would you describe the feeling of completing the journey? Because it must have been a mix of emotions.
Yeah, look, it was. And by the time we got to the end, we were really tired. we had quite a few, quite a bit of panel damage. You know, my wife Sue had fractured 2 ribs when we fell down the Waiau Pass, and Kerry had a fresh fracture in her tibia, and you know, we had lots of blisters and so on. So we were trail fit, but boy, we were looking forward to the end. And on the last day, when we were walking from Invercargill to Bluff, most of it is alongside the highway, and it was one of the fiercest. It was probably the heaviest wind, strongest wind we struck of the whole trip. We're staggering along like drunks, you know, 45 degrees into this blast, and, and thinking, oh wow, this is going to be great to get to Bluff. And a truckie went past, and he obviously knew what we were doing, and he was honking on his horn, honk, 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 you know, and giving us a huge wave. And I started to cry. I was just so emotional. And so, you know, being a big tough guy, I didn't mention this to Sue, and I just said, gee, you know, like the wind had made me tear up. But then I admitted it, and she said the same for her. We just, you know, so much effort had gone into it, and you know, over those 2 summers, and it dominated our lives really. And so then when we got to Bluff, and some very dear friends were there waiting for us, and we just went over the road, and ate a lot of oysters and drank a hell of a lot of wine.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That's a brilliant way to finish that. I imagine a trip and a journey like that really would change you as a person too. So the emotion is palpable, I'm sure. Do you have any advice for people who are thinking about hiking this trail? Like, I know it's a really long, arduous journey, and you probably do need to have some kind of stamina, but do you have any top tips that people might find helpful?
We met a interesting woman from the Czech Republic along the way, and we almost apologized for what she was a through walker doing in one hit. And we almost we did. We apologized for the namby-pamby way we were doing it in the North Island, where Kerry's dear husband Rex would pick us up at the end of the day, and you know, we go off and have the luxury of a nice motel and a nice meal. We couldn't do that in the South Island, you know, where you in tramping in remote areas. But this woman said, I do not judge. Everybody is on their own journey. So everybody, I think, tackles the TA in their own way. We met a grandfather, father and son who were doing it over 7 years. Lots of people do it in bites. And we've, you know, the feedback we've had on the book and what we did is enormous. You know, so many people saying, gee, I'd really love to do that. And we've said, well, you know, just go out and do a bite at a time. Because anybody who's reasonably fit can do the TA. 90% of it is mental. You know, look, most people could go out and walk, you know, 20, 25, 30 kilometers. But doing it the next day and the day after that and the day after that, you know, subjecting yourself to discomfort and you know, some pain at times is another matter. So you have to have that resolve to, hey, I really want to do this, and I want to treat each day as an adventure. You know, hey, obviously we've got some trail notes and we've got some idea of what's ahead, but really we're stepping into each day not knowing what we're going to experience. And, you know, in your normal life, you don't have that. So, you know, it really is a step outside of your comfort zone. And that's really challenging, but it's also really exciting.
Yeah. Well, I never really thought about the I guess the mental strain it would take on you. So that's a really good tip, I think, for people to be aware of, is that it is more than just physical. So great.
Yes.
Yeah. Are there any more hikes like this in store for you, like overseas in New Zealand? Do you have any more plans to write novels like this?
Yeah. Definitely not another long distance walk. That itch has been scratched.
Mm.
And this is right up there. In America, there's two big ones, the Appalachian, which covers 13 states. It's only a little bit longer than the Te Araroa. But you just apparently just walk through a canopy of trees for day after day after day. And then there's the Pacific Crest Trail, which I think is about 4,000 kilometers. And the other really famous one is the El Camino through Spain and France. But that for many people, that's more of a spiritual journey. So no, none of those appeal. We'd be very happy doing day walks, or which we still want to get into the bush and keep fit. But I think an overnighter would be enough.
Yeah.
So no, that one's ticked off. As for doing any more writing, I have, this is the second non-fiction book that I've written. I do have in my drawer about 20,000 words of a fiction story. So now I'm resolved to pull that out and have another crack at it. But I think fiction is quite a lot harder than writing non-fiction.
Well, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there for sure. But yeah, but yeah, I think that you've done this trail, you've written this book, big ticket list items that have been ticked off, and congratulations on completing it and the book, and everything's going amazingly with it here. So yeah, just well done, and thank you so much for joining me as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and to learn a little bit more about the ins and outs of the Te Araroa. And yeah, all the best with your future writing endeavors.
Thank you very much. Nicely done.